Hey, you all. Carpetbagger here, coming to you live from my bunker, 30,500 miles beneath the surface of the South. And I've been getting a question asked over and over. It's been asked quite a bit recently. It's been asked quite a bit over the past couple years. And that is, what's the deal with the possum? Why do I use possum imagery? Why do I have possums in my logo? Why do I have possums in the intro of these videos? And I figured I'd just take a whole video to talk about my love of possums and my usage of the possum. Now, I think the first time that I was ever fascinated with possums was I read this fact in a book. And this fact is actually not true, but it fascinated me because I thought it was true. It used to be, you read something in a book, you couldn't look it up on the internet and disprove it, but I read somewhere, and I do not remember where I read this. And if you have heard this same fact, please leave a comment in the comment section, because I feel like I've heard this in more than one place. But anyways, the fact was, I read possums were the only animal besides humans that had opposable thumbs, meaning there were something about possums was just like us humans that was like no other animal. Turns out that fact is not true, and if you do some research on the internet, there's not even a clear answer on what opposable thumbs are exactly. But the closest that I can understand from my gleaming of the science is possums are the only non-primate animal to have opposable thumbs. And kind of what that means is especially their back feet, their feet, they look like this. They have little thumbs. It doesn't look like a toe. They have like a handprint, and that helps them with climbing. And so you would immediately think a possum is a very advanced animal. If it has something that so few animals share, except more advanced animals like humans and monkeys, then they must be this high level mammal. Well, that's actually not true. In fact, the opposite is true. Possums are actually considered to be a very primitive form of mammal. They believe that some of the very first mammals that started appearing alongside dinosaurs were actually essentially possums. So you've got this very primitive animal that has what is seen as a very high level evolutionary trait, which that alone fascinates me. This is an animal that is just full of contradictions. And I think one thing that just attracts me into this animal is just the absolute strangeness of this creature. Like I said, it might have fit in back in prehistoric times, but it sticks out like a sore thumb here in modern times. It looks weird. It has a weird shaped head. It has virtually no self-defense mechanisms. It doesn't have claws to scratch you. It's not very fast. When it walks through the woods, it makes a bunch of noise that attracts predators. We're talking about an animal whose main defense mechanism is to make other animals think that they've already killed it. Wasn't that the little brother's self-defense mechanism in Christmas Story? But in addition to having all these unusual weaknesses, they actually have some superpowers as well. People always worry about wild animals giving them rabies, and a lot of wild animals, bats, raccoons, they can give you rabies, but possums can't carry rabies. They cannot become infected with rabies because their blood temperature does not allow rabies to be carried in their body. You cannot get rabies from a possum. They're also like immune to snake bites. It's just something very interesting is going on in that possum chemistry. There's actually been studies with possum blood to make immunity to snake bites. So it's just a fascinating creature. Now, when I created this channel, the original kind of focus was supposed to be the American South. When I made my blog with a B and eventually my early videos, I was focusing on Southern culture. And for whatever reason, possums seem really entrenched in Southern culture. A lot of times you see possums used in like Southern humor or hillbilly humor. Always laughing about possums being roadkill is a common joke because they're not very fast. They can't get across the roads very well. And so I, began incorporating, in the pictures I took, in the stuff I wrote about, but I acknowledged the possum. You really see the South as like this land of contradictions, these very, very complicated and rich history, dark history, and very bright history all mixed in together. So a land of contradictions. I think the possum is actually quite a fitting mascot for the South itself. And probably one of the most amazing nights of my life involved the possum. I went over to Clay's Corner, North Carolina, Brasstown, North Carolina. Clay's Corner is this gas station, and they did, on New Year's Eve, they did a yearly possum drop. And I could spend a whole video talking about the possum drop. I actually did a video filmed for this channel years ago about the possum drop. But to make it short, on New Year's Eve, at a stroke of midnight, they would lower a live possum in a cage from a crane as they set off fireworks and celebrated New Year's Eve, and then they would let the possum free.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year!
And then it became this whole big legal battle and this fight with PETA, but we won't get into any of that. But I remember during these festivities, there was a character, a man in a giant possum suit that they called Opie, the drug-free possum. I guess he was a local mascot that spoke out against using drugs, and he was a giant man in a possum suit. And probably the height of my fascination was I went into the old Guinness World Records Museum in Gatlinburg, and they had the grossest, most decrepit taxidermied possum. This thing looked like it would fall apart if you touched it. It actually had babies coming out of its pouch. I haven't even mentioned their marsupials. They're the only marsupials in the Americas. But anyways, so there was this decrepit taxidermied possum, and it had these little decrepit skull babies coming out of its pouch. This thing was horrifying, and I loved it. I took a picture. This was even before my blog. I took this picture. I put it on Flickr. People were were amused by how this awful piece of taxidermy could exist. And then when I did start my blog, I actually used it. I made this awful banner that I created myself using my non-existent Photoshop skills, and I included this horrific taxidermied possum in the graphic. And then the strange part that ties the story all back together is later I was doing videos, creating vlogs with a V, and I go to Ripley's Believe It or Not in Niagara Falls, Canada, and I find the possum. It actually disappeared from Gatlinburg years and years when they remodeled the Guinness World Records Museum, but I found that possum that I had obsessed over and taken the picture of. I found him sitting in a shooting gallery in the Ripley's in Niagara Falls, Canada. So full circle, I became reaccustomed to the decrepit mother possum. But I actually used that image that when I started this YouTube channel, my logo, my face, when I commented on videos, when I posted videos, was that picture of that taxidermied possum. It was later replaced with a wonderful drawing of my face by Mr. Chicanery. But up to that point, my image was a decrepit taxidermied possum. So when I started making actual videos, when I moved from having a blog with a B to a vlog with a V, I wanted to have an animation or something come up, to let you know what you're watching. And I did not know how to do that. I didn't know how to make digital animations. I didn't know anything. So I figured I would make something, maybe create a graphic or an image. And so I had a collection of old suitcases. It was someone found it in an old closet at the old building I worked in. When I was working in Child Protective Services, the building we worked in was an old hospital. And we had all sorts of weird things that we'd find in the closets. And someone found this whole stack of antique suitcases, and they were going to throw it in the dumpster. So I decided to take them home. So I was like, I need a canvas, something to paint on. So I went and looked. I was going to paint that on the suitcases, and I found this bright red suitcase. It stood out. It stood out more than the other suitcases, just because of the bright red color. And it's interesting, like the red color scheme. That basically came from me just picking this suitcase. I still use that red color scheme, you know, in a lot of imagery for this channel. But let me back up here. See if I can back up. This is the original Carpetbagger suitcase. I painted the carpetbagger.org. It's a relic. That's my old website, my old blog with a B. And just because the suitcase seemed empty, I just decided to paint a little possum there. Grab some gray paint, some pink paint, some white paint, and a little black dot for an eye. And I just scribbled a very crude little possum there on the suitcase. And we incorporate that suitcase into multiple old intros. The channel's had several intros. The original, I would drive through all these different areas and then finally drive up to the suitcase sitting in the middle of the road, right in front of my house, actually. And then I had another intro where I would do different items in the suitcase and close it, and then I would have that. So that was kind of my way around not being able to do any sort of animation or graphic design. But then I met a friend of mine who could do animation and graphic design. My good friend Jeff from Creaties. He contacted me and offered to create an animated intro for me. And of course, you know, and let me just say, Jeff, amazing creative person. He gets 100% credit for the intros that he's created for me. I really just kind of, he's familiar with my channel. He knew enough about me, so I just gave him free reign to do what he thought would look good for the channel, and the intros are what he's come up with. Of course, you know, we did talk and we agreed that we did want the possum to be part of the video, and the possum was the first animated intro he made for me. The possum was sitting there playing the banjo at the very beginning, and then in the later intro, the current intro that I'm using, the possum is sneaking up through the car, ready to surprise me. And then we also did a special Christmas intro where the possums were all pulling me on a Santa sleigh. You know, taxidermy is always something I've been really fascinated with, and I always wanted to own my own taxidermy possums. I wanted to own that one that I saw in Guinness World Record. Of course, it wasn't for sale, but just this year, I finally got a taxidermy possum of my own. I got this at the Oddities and Curiosities Expo that they had in Knoxville. This is a wonderful, this is one of the few pieces of taxidermy I have that's actually modern. A lot of the taxidermy I have is old and dusty, but this is a modern piece of taxidermy. It's really soft. You can actually pet it because the fur's been done, and it's an excellent piece. So I decided to purchase this, to splurge, and to add this to my bunker. I do have other possums though. When I visited Backyard Terrors Dinosaur Park, they also have like a haunted house there, or they used to have a haunted house on the property there, and as part of the haunted house they had a mummified possum in an aquarium full of salt. The owner, Chris, actually found the dead possum in his barn and had placed it in rock salt to dry it out. And then one time I came by and he asked me if I wanted it, and I'm like, of course I do. Of course I do. So it sat sealed for several years here in the bunker, and finally I was brave enough where I broke the possum out of the salt, and so now I have a preserved possum salt mummy in my bunker as well. But recently I added one additional piece of possum taxidermy to my collection. I was just, so every once in a while, I just pop the word taxidermy into eBay and see what pops up, and I saw something that I simply had to have. So say hello to the newest member of the Carpetbagger family. Check him out. So my other possum was so nice and friendly, I figured I needed a more vicious possum to add to my collection. You can see there, he's mounted on this piece of wood. He's almost like this, got this like growling, like wolf predator look. I don't think a possum ever actually makes that mean of a face in real life, but I saw this and I absolutely had to have it. A wonderful piece here. I need to come up names for my two possums. I think the mummy I think I'll just call Salty, but other than that, we need to think of some names. Look at it. He has this like weird fake tail too. But finally, I have a possum that's disturbing, almost, not quite, almost as disturbing as that original possum I fell in love with at the Guinness Book of World Records Museum. So if you are a fan of this channel and you enjoy possums, I do have a enamel possum pin in the Etsy shop. This is from the intro where the possum is playing the banjo. Has some other styles of enamel pins in there as well. If you're interested, all that is in the description of this video. Thank you guys for watching this, and thank you for caring enough to ask about my unhealthy obsession with possums. I hope this helped clear up things at least just a little. Until next time, this one's in the bag. Before we get started here, I do say possum. That is kind of the colloquial way that it is said down here in the South. I'm not from the South, but I've always preferred the term possum, P-O-S-S-U-M, as opposed to opossum, O-P-U-S-S-S. Anyway, never mind. We never